Number 10, Mistress Death. To call this character evil is a bit of a miscommunication. She is just a law of the universe, a force of nature, a cosmic being carrying out her duty. But to many people, she is an evil entity because, losing a loved one is one of the most emotionally painful things we can go through. No matter if you see her as evil or just doing her job, she has been around since the creation of the universe, so there is no doubt that she is ancient. So I'm keeping her here at the top of the list because she isn't entirely evil and has comforted and even saved a few people on a few occasions, but still brings the end of the line. She keeps balance in the universe, taking away life while other cosmic entities give it. Also, she's a big part of the reason Thanos has done all the horrible things he's done in Marvel Comics, so there's that as well to make her seem a bit more evil.
Coming up on the 9th spot is Null. That's with a K. And this fella is bad news. He's an Eldritch entity, the god of darkness, ruler of the void, and oh yeah, homeboy created the symbiotes. Any evil that's come from the many symbiotes can all be traced back to Null, who rules over the hive mind. When you stop and consider just how much suffering the symbiotes have been responsible for, how much damage and destruction, and all of that can be pointed back to Null, you gotta figure that is a pretty powerful ancient evil. Decked out with some sweet symbiote armor and an impressive sword, Null has his sights set on galactic conquest with his symbiote army. And honestly, he was making a pretty good play for the throne were he not stopped by Eddie Brock in a truly staggering duel of cosmic proportions. Sure, yeah, you might have birthed the symbiote race, but it's hard for anyone to top the guy who made symbiotes cool in the first place. You can't beat Venom. He's got his own theme song by Eminem. How many of us can say the same?
Number 8, Selene. While a lot of beings on this list are cosmic and godlike in their nature, Selene is a mutant external and a magician born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Yikes. Essentially, she is a vampire, just without any of the blood draining stuff. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. But that's not her only powers. As an external, she also possesses immortality, allowing her to even resurrect herself. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She has demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the knack for being just pretty sinister.
Number 7, Shumagorath. Now maybe you remember Shumagorath from a star-studded appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Except psych! Due to a licensing issue, that was actually Gargantos. But it was supposed to be Shumagorath, so you were right to think that. Marvel's resident Lovecraftian god, who's lived for millions of years beyond the stars. Even older than the Marvel Universe itself. Quite literally, if you want to get a bit metatextual with it, since Shumagorath began life as a villain for the Conan mythos, tying itself into the greater Cthulhu mythos with H.P. Lovecraft, who was a pretty good friend of Robert E. Howard back in the day. It's a pretty interesting backstory and makes sense since Shumagorath is an all-powerful multi-dimensional entity. It only makes sense that it exists across the multiverse in ours as well. Shumagorath is about as powerful as a Lovecraftian god can get, boasting all the usual feats, incredible strength, difficult to put down, all kinds of psychokinetic abilities that leads him into all sorts of clashes with everybody's favorite sorcerer, Doctor Strange.
Number 6, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose a bigger version of him? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Fimbulwinter, for the Norse mythology people out there, was the one who brought the end of the 6th iteration of the universe, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, and that's the guy who becomes Galactus. When the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possesses the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, and it's awesome. Granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. Luckily though, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe, he is just here for his herald, Galactus. Luckily, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter. It's all just super awesome. Definitely check it out.
Number 5, Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, yeah, you get it. You saw the movie, you know what I'm doing. Doctor Strange's greatest nemesis is also one of the most powerful ancient evils in the Marvel Universe across the multiverse. Ruler of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu is an interdimensional entity capable of existing for eons, capable of all sorts of impressive magical feats like conjuration, being able to summon creatures under his dominion, even bending the law of physics to his will. Dormammu is already crazy strong, but it's only amplified more if he's in the dark dimension, his home turf. Now he doesn't just get a home field advantage by being there because the sun's not in his eyes. He's able to siphon energy directly from the dark dimension to fuel himself, as well as draining his followers for their energy. Dormammu is the perfect foil for a hero like Doctor Strange, an incredibly powerful, omnipotent being who can't be defeated outright with traditional brawls or fisticuffs, and needs to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered. Luckily, the Sorcerer Supreme usually has a handle on it. Usually.
Number 4, the Chaos King. The entity known as Amatsu Mikubashi originally was portrayed as the Japanese god of evil, but in actuality, he was an offshoot of Oblivion, the cosmic entity embodying the void that existed before the universe began. Because of course he was. An incarnation of the primordial darkness and chaos that existed before the universe, the Chaos King exists as a dark counterpart to the cosmic being Eternity. That by itself makes Amatsu an incredibly powerful being on a cosmic level. In a mission to bring everything to chaos, he started waging war on all the gods of every pantheon in the universe, and he actually did defeat and take control of almost all of them. It took a combined effort of heroes plus Hercules, who was amped up to incredibly insane godlike levels, to take him down in the Chaos War storyline. Absolutely check it out if you haven't already, it's fantastic.
Number 3, Mephisto. If you're not a big comics fan, maybe you recognize the name Mephisto from countless Reddit threads and headlines saying he'd be appearing in the next episode of WandaVision somewhere. Remember how convinced we all were? Simpler days. So just who is Mephisto actually? Well, basically for all intents and purposes, he's the Marvel Comics version of Satan. Where things get incredibly confusing is that he's not actually Satan, because that's a separate character in the Marvel Universe, but he's his own evil, powerful entity, and boy is he that. Mephisto is a long-standing evil, responsible for a lot of some of the biggest suffering in the Marvel Universe. He captured Doctor Doom's mother's soul, he bonded Johnny Blaze to the Ghost Rider, and those are just some of his lesser feats. Mephisto is capable of full-scale reality alteration, like when he infamously changed the entire Marvel timeline to erase Peter and Mary Jane's marriage in exchange for healing Aunt May. Also, he could nip a timeline in the bud where he was defeated by Spider-Man's daughter. You gotta respect that level of pettiness. He hasn't shown up in the MCU yet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's coming soon. Just give it some time. One more day, maybe.
And in at number 2 is Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, Lord of Oblivion, and Master of the Raging Storm, is an immensely powerful extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. He was worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos. As the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. To do this from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, like Kane Marco and the other avatars. Now, if you pay close attention to the magic wielders in the Marvel Universe, particularly Doctor Strange, you will hear them invoking Sidorak's name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. He doesn't really show up a lot in the pages of Marvel Comics, but when he does, it's always as this super imposing, terrible force.
And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, well, it only made sense to have this below everyone else, the one below all. Yeah. Kinda hard to top that. The one below all is the dark side of the one above all, the highest form of creation in the Marvel multiverse. If the one above all is the embodiment of all the compassion and love that exists out there, well then the one below is the opposite of that and the beautiful embodiment of all the hatred and rage that's inside us all. It's a bit of an Eldritch creature, existing in the lowest points of reality, you know, below all, quite literally, it's in the name. It's responsible for all the gamma radiation in the world, as this is how it manifests itself throughout the multiverse. All of Hulk's rage and anger stems from drops of hatred of the one below all, just a tiny fraction of what it could be capable of. The one below all has existed before the multiverse, the universe itself even. and is thought to ultimately be the harbinger of all evil that's ever manifested in the Marvel Universe. Considering how much darkness, how much hate, how much evil exists out there, that's gotta count for something. Mephisto was unable to thwart the One Below All, saying it was more powerful than he was. Bruce Banner theorized that Null, god of the symbiotes, was just another avatar of the One Below All. Meaning when it comes to ultimate evil, it's kinda hard to top something below it all.
Number 10. Namor. While many folks think of Namor as being an anti-hero, and honestly he most definitely is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe he's only really been presented to us as like a straight up villain. Albeit a straight up villain with a pretty powerful and universally relatable motive, I would say. He does what he does in an effort to protect his people and to defend the oceans from those who would pollute and destroy them. AKA, that's us. I think we can all get behind that message. I know I can, as someone that, doesn't want our oceans to bubble and boil and just be filled with garbage. However, Namor's methods honestly could use some work from a heroic standpoint. Namor is presented as being both brutal and cruel when it comes to his actions, which makes him a villain in the MCU. While he is around 100 years old in the comics at this point, his live action adaptation was made considerably older and is estimated based on his origin to actually be around 500 years old. Woo!
Number 9. Black Adam. Another anti-hero? I promise this won't be a common occurrence. There are two main different origin stories for Black Adam. In the pre-New 52 era of DC, circa 1200 BC, the wizard Shazam became a high priest to the pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This is where he met the young prince Teth Adam of Kahndaq. Ramses' son. There we go. Teth Adam impressed the wizard with his fairness and decency, and boom, he was granted the power. But in the more recent continuity, Teth Adam was born in Egypt in the 26th century BCE along the banks of the Nile as part of the Kahndaqi tribe, and it did not take long for him to be forced into a life of unwilling servitude. Very different. His entire family lost their lives except for his nephew Ammon. Ammon would save Teth Adam's life, which got him the recognition of the wizard Shazam, who turned Ammon into his champion. Ammon then shared this power with his uncle Teth Adam, but not seeing eye to eye on how to use the power, Black Adam took his own nephew off of the board and stole the power for himself. This was before he was either banished, stuck in a scarab, or locked away in a tomb, depending on which era you want to talk about. But no matter when we are talking about, Black Adam has been a threat to everyone, and he took on almost the entire world when his family was taken from him back in DC's World War III.
Number 8. Rotath of Lemuria. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented, often in stories that take place in the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. He made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 1970s, when almost everyone who read comics or otherwise was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return, and so he did. This time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated here. This time not by Kull directly, but instead by, well, a giant slug after fighting against Conan and Juma. This is a true story, by the way. Man, I hate when I get defeated by giant slugs.
Ah, slugs, man, they get
Slugs.
you. It's funny because all you need is like a little bit. All you need is like a little bit of table salt. Take that sucker off the board. All right, number 7, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, quote unquote, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife Hegra and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all existed in the first place. So he's a conqueror, but also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal, but Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act fact release energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and cause the universe itself to shake. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing with millions of other worlds while on his way back to Apokolips. His return to Apokolips made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his own son, Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War.
Mine are so Conan. I went really Conan with this list.
I respect that though.
I mean, there's lots of old guys, cause...
Mine are all like spacey.
Yeah, it's so true though, space is old. Number 6, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath is probably one of the most iconic villains that Conan the Barbarian has had in the comics. He is so old, in fact, that he also became the enemy of another ancient villain known as the Mutant External, more specifically Selene. Not to be confused with the Eternals, who are their own thing entirely. These are the Externals, not the Eternals. Kulan Gath made his first full feature appearance back in 1972 in the comics in Conan the Barbarian issue number 15.
Number 5, Larfleeze. Larfleeze, or Agent Orange, is one unique character in the emotional spectrum, and that's because he's the sole wielder of the Orange Light of Avarice. He is the only member of the Orange Lantern Corps. Larfleeze is driven by an insatiable greed that grants him dominion over all that he desires, driving him into conflict with whoever possesses what it is that he desires, and over the power of the Orange Lanterns, which represent greed. His power is centered on his ability to conjure constructs using the stolen identity and forms of those he has absorbed into his horde, making him basically an army unto himself. This ability extends even to abstract concepts and beings, showcasing the extent of his control. The big thing about Larfleeze is that since he's spent so much time with his Orange Lantern and Ring, he has basically become the Orange Lantern and Ring himself. This energy grants him huge levels of power. His constructs are virtually indestructible and can overwhelm even the most powerful opponents. However, Larfleeze's power comes at the cost of his individuality, as his insatiable greed makes him less of a person and more of a living embodiment of greed itself. Even without the power of the Orange Lanterns though, his race is already basically immortal, with Larfleeze himself being billions of years old, and with enough power that I seriously doubt he'll be going down anytime soon.
Number 4, Thulsa Doom. When it comes to Conan, he definitely has a type when it comes to some of his greatest enemies. Typically, he's caught in the midst of epic battles against evil sorcerers or wizards. In Thulsa Doom's case, his brand of evil magic user is Necromancer. While Thulsa Doom became a famous Conan villain thanks to his appearance as the main antagonist in the 1982 Conan the Barbarian movie, he initially started out as a villain for what some consider to be a more nuanced barbarian hero also created by Robert E. Howard, Kull of Atlantis, or Kull the Conqueror, as he was also known.
Number 3, Shumagorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Shumagorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods, or the many-angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across entire dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magics. While his form seems pretty silly, cause it is, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter this appearance however he sees fit. This is actually because it's not even his true form. His true form is apparently not even comprehensible to us humans. Boo. Shumagorath can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and this old god has also the ability to destroy entire realities. He is the most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done with that fraction of power, that should tell you just how powerful he is.
Number 2, Skrulls. All of them. There's many. They're not all bad, but they started bad. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around, although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore. In fact, some Skrulls have even become better known as heroes in recent years. Originally though, Skrulls appeared as a villainous alien race in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 2, and who were focused solely, during their appearance, on basically conquering Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced in the previous issue, which was basically all Issue 1 was really about, the team's origin story. The Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, at this point anyways, despite the fact that they had just sorta, started their superhero careers, which is pretty crazy. Knowing this, the Skrulls decided to pose as the FF and commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them, hoping to discredit the Fantastic Four to the point that the US military would capture and then kill the Fantastic team. With the Fantastic Four disposed of, the Earth would then be ripe for the Skrulls' taking. Of course, this plan was foiled as the FF trapped the imposters and ended up posing as them, taking the Skrulls' idea but executing it much better. Disguised as the Skrulls, the FF would tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, causing them to just call off the invasion. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, taking the form of cows and living in apparent peace, as they apparently really enjoyed living as cows. Skrulls themselves can live hundreds of years, and their empire has existed for tens of millions of years, which means those cows are gonna be really, really old.
Can you imagine you're like millions of years old conquerors, and then you go to the planet, you make all yours like all the way there, and then someone's like, you know what, I think it's gonna be too hard, and they're just like, you're right, let's just go.
You're right.
You're right, we should just go.
And then those guys are just like, why don't we just be cows?
And
that's your life.
Moo. Number 1, the Great Darkness. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation itself. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God in DC Comics, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, I believe is how you pronounce it, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, this was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was in the universe. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the 3 main figures of Hell to form a union with each other just in case something went wrong. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back, and they became one and the same as like yin and yang, or as a balance. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also just kind of force of nature doing its thing.
Number 10, Anti-Monitor. Anti-Monitor is a supremely powerful villain who threatened the very existence of the multiverse during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He controls the antimatter universe, and his very existence is deeply tied to the destruction of all things. So much so that even after the Anti-Monitor was defeated, Nekron ended up trapping the Anti-Monitor's body. It was later revealed in Blackest Night that Nekron had basically been using Anti-Monitor's corpse as a source of power for the Black Central Power Battery. So yeah, even in death he's scary. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please, please, please be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button and coming back. Come on back. Number 9, Rotath of Lemuria. Rotath of Lemuria is a prominent figure in the stories from the Hyborian Age. Rotath made his debut in Conan the Barbarian issue number 37, which was published in the 70s during the peak, I would say, of the sword and sorcery genre. The king of Lemuria was scared of Rotath's power, understandably so, as many magic users back in those days of these comics tended to be pretty evil, which Rotath also was. So he hired Kull to defeat and kill him. However, as he was dying, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull and cast a spell so that he could return. He didn't just return too, he came back with a gold body. Number 8, Grail. Grail was born on the same day as Wonder Woman, who is believed to be a few millennia old based on Amazon history, and considering when the Amazons left man's world and how long after that Diana was brought into their world as Hippolyta's daughter. Though that still means that she's likely considerably younger than her father, who is also super old. Grail, the daughter of Amazon assassin Myrna and Darkseid, is the offspring of one of the most feared villains in the DC universe. That's right, we're talking about Darkseid. Darkseid is known for being a powerful adversary to all major superheroes, I'd say, but especially the Justice League. He's a master strategist, he's incredibly strong and durable, and additionally he of course has his Omega beams that he can use to destroy his enemies, or I guess displace them through time. Number 7, Skrulls. The Skrulls have been a part of the comic book universe for a long time, and while some of them have become heroes in recent years, they were initially eventually introduced as villains. In the second issue of Fantastic Four, they were portrayed as an alien race with designs for world domination, hoping to conquer Earth by infiltrating it and basically posing as the Fantastic Four, committing evil deeds. Their goal was to discredit the Fantastic Four and have the FF's own national government and military capture and eliminate them. See, because then Earth would have no protectors and they'd be able to take it for themselves. Look, this was early days of comics, so everyone else wasn't really like as prominent yet. However, the FF managed to capture the Skrull impersonators and posed as them instead, causing the Skrull leader to call off the invasion. They did a little switcheroo there. They were like, we see your plan and we will do it, but we will do it better. In the end, the Skrulls who posed as the FF were left behind and took the form of cows, living in apparent peace on the planet's surface, but isolated from their homeworld and of course their people. Although they didn't seem to mind, I think they were pretty happy as cows. As we saw alluded to in the MCU's Secret Invasion, Skrulls can actually live for hundreds of years, and in the comics their empire has existed for tens of millions of years. Despite them losing that battle though, the Skrulls would not give up on Earth and years later would almost claim it for themselves during the comic book Secret Invasion event, where they were led by the Skrull Queen, Varanki. Number 6. Darkseid. Darkseid is a powerful and formidable villain in the DC Comics universe, ruling over Apocalypse with an army of loyal soldiers known as the Parademons. Despite facing challenges and battles against numerous heroes and villains, Darkseid has managed to defeat many of them, including seemingly defeating the entirety of the Justice League on multiple occasions. What sets Darkseid apart from other villains is his sense of inevitability and unstoppable power. This is illustrated by the catchphrase "Darkseid is," which has become iconic in comic book history and was coined by Grant Morrison. The phrase "Darkseid is" basically means that Darkseid is inevitable and all-powerful. You don't have to finish the sentence because he just is. He is an evil constant who must and will always exist, a terrifying thought when you've experienced firsthand his brutal power and iron will. Darkseid's immense strength and ruthless army make him a terrifying and honestly unforgettable villain. Number 5. Raquel. Sure, Raquel might be in prison currently, or at least that's where she was put at the end of the Empire event last I checked, but that doesn't mean she is down and out for the count. Au contraire. Instead, it simply means that she's likely biding her time and she's eventually once more going to attempt to do something to manipulate her grandson further into unifying and dominating other worlds, as she orchestrated the fusion of the Kree and Skrull together with the Kree-Skrull alliance. And if I've missed anything here and she's doing something else or she was eliminated, trust me, I do not think she's eliminated. For years we thought she had perished along with the rest of her people when her world was destroyed by Galactus, and for years we were apparently wrong in this. What's to stop her from surprising us yet again, you know what I mean? Number 4. Mandrak the Dark Monitor. Mandrak was once, or is, depending on what you believe, Dax Novu. And Dax Novu was once a part of the Monitor. Following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the injuries the Monitor had suffered caused it to basically splinter apart somewhat, dividing its body and creating other smaller monitors. Dax Novu was one of these monitors. He eventually realized that the monitors were parasitic beings who were feeding on the energies of the multiverse, slowly consuming and destroying it. He informed the other monitors but was basically shunned for attempting to share his realization, and this is pretty much what turned him, well, dark. Dax then became corrupted, turning into a dark monitor known as Mandrak. Number 3. Thulsa Doom. Conan, the famous barbarian created by Robert E. Howard, has faced many powerful enemies on his adventures. However, he often finds himself in epic battles against evil sorcerers and wizards, as so many barbarians from that age of comics do. One of his most well-known foes, Thulsa Doom, is a necromancer who uses dark magic to achieve his wicked goals. Thulsa Doom made his first comic book appearance way back in Monsters on the Prowl issue number 16 in terms of the comics. Interestingly, Thulsa Doom was originally created as a villain for Robert E. Howard's other barbarian hero, Kull of Atlantis, who was considered by some to be a more complex and well-rounded character than Conan was. However, Thulsa Doom's appearance as the main antagonist in the 1982 film Conan the Barbarian solidified his place in popular culture as one of Conan's greatest enemies, and so that's how we see him today. Number 2. Apocalypse. There is a whole reality based on the question of what would happen if Apocalypse was basically unable to be stopped. This reality is known as Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse, or AOA if you will. And in this world, apocalypse becomes pretty much inevitable thanks to the early demise of one man, Charles Xavier, Professor X. The reality of Age of Apocalypse just goes to show you what a force apocalypse is, and if an alternate reality where apocalypse literally rules the world is somehow not enough to convince you of how unstoppable this villain can be, you can also turn to the more recent X-Men event 10 of Swords, which happened a few years ago, aka the Otherworld Tournament. During this fight, Apocalypse faced his wife, who was possessed by Annihilation, and even against the seemingly unbeatable foe that was Annihilation, who can pretty much never lose, Apocalypse managed to win, saving his wife and freeing her from the influence of the Golden Helm, while also saving basically all of Krakoa, Mutant Kind, and Otherworld. Yeah, so this wasn't his most villainous moment, but normally Apocalypse is a villain, and this just serves as another example to show you how he basically can't be stopped. Number 1. Great Darkness. The Great Darkness is in essence one of the oldest evils in the DC multiverse. In the beginning, it was said there was only darkness, however a small light was also created and eventually it grew. When the creator said, "Let there be light," the darkness was forced to shy away and retreat, but its screams of protest left a mark on the light, a flaw, which is believed to basically have become the DC multiverse. At one point, a cult attempted to reawaken the Great Darkness and use it as a weapon to destroy God and reshape all of existence. This created a divide, with various beings allying themselves with the Great Darkness, fighting on the side of hell, while others worked to oppose the entity, allying themselves with the side of heaven, the side of light if you will. The Great Darkness has long been tied to the stories of heroes like Swamp Thing and John Constantine, making its first appearance in the Swamp Thing series from 1982.
Coming in at number 10 is Selene. Selene is a mutant, and what is known as an external. Externals are essentially a group of immortals that include characters like Apocalypse and Gideon, who can resurrect themselves and all share a psychic link, which is the main thing that separates them from other immortals. Selene is also a magician and was born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Essentially, she's like an energy vampire. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. Since she has been around for so long, she's quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She's demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and a knack for being pretty sinister, but not really being too well known to casual fans. Number 9. Barbados. Barbados is one of the big bads from the death metal event, but because we had the Batman Who Laughs, I think Barbados kind of fell by the wayside for a few people, and I'll admit, I was one of them. But Barbados is nothing to scoff at. In the earliest days of existence, two siblings came into reality, tasked with monitoring creation. Along with them came a third being known as the Forger, who was set to watch over creations that would exist in the future. The Forger made its home in the Forge of Worlds inside what would later be named the Dark Multiverse. The Forger created universes based on the hopes and fears of every living thing. And while the stable universes became part of the multiverse, the Forger would dispatch its dragon to destroy the unstable worlds so their energy could be returned to the Forge and recycled. That dragon is Barbados. Barbados had a lust for destruction, which eventually led him to take out the Forger and corrupt the World Forge. The unstable worlds persisted beyond their time and became part of the dark multiverse field with horrifying realities. He then changed his goals, setting his warpath onto the regular multiverse. Now fast forward multiple centuries, and Barbados' followers started to secretly prepare Batman to become the doorway for Barbados to enter the Prime Earth from the dark multiverse, causing a big old mess in the DC multiverse. Number 8. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, while on the cusp of the afterlife and in incredible pain due to his hunger, this mutant's powers finally activated. He gained superhuman strength and durability alongside an extremely bestial form similar to a minotaur, but almost as if made of stone, like a minotaur statue, but cooler. While he is incredibly strong and durable, his even more powerful mutant ability is called Empathic War Infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he went boom. Decimus became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. And in at number 7 is Conquest. Viltrumites, who are featured in Image Comics' Invincible series, are incredibly hardy folk. They have levels of strength and durability akin to Superman without having to be solar charged and without being allergic to big green rocks. They also grow stronger and stronger with both age and experience. One of their oldest, most honored warriors is a Viltrumite by the name of Conquest. Viltrumites live for a very long time. Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, is a fully adult Viltrumite, and he has lived for thousands and thousands of years, and he has only a small show of white hair to show for it. Of all the Viltrumites seen in the comics, a rare few have fully white hair. Conquest not only has that, but he has lost a lot of his hair, is super wrinkly, and he's also battle scarred and missing an arm. Back in the day, the Viltrumites were exposed to a virus that nearly wiped them out, called the Scourge virus. Conquest was one of the few that survived, but he was left weakened after it left his system, which happened to coincide with his arrival on a planet filled with Ragnar, which are the only species in the universe that can actually kill Viltrumites. So that's where the missing arm and scarring comes from. Conquest is one of the strongest Viltrumites around, and even when his face is turned into tomato soup by Invincible, he still regenerates and comes back for round 2. Number 6, Malbolgia. And we are sticking with Image Comics for this point, but moving away from Invincible, we are going to talk about Spawn. Now, yes, I am a little lacking in the knowledge department when it comes to Spawn comics, but I do know that the whole reason Al Simmons became a Hellspawn in the first place is because of this guy, the ruler of the 8th sphere of Hell, Malbolgia. Over 70,000 years ago, this being was created by a past ruler of Hell out of necroplasm rivers, but he was so powerful that he betrayed, overpowered, and took the life of his creator. In order to wage war on heaven and destroy God, he created an army of Hellspawn, but he needed a general, which he couldn't find until he found Al Simmons. He made a deal with a man named Jason Wynn to take Al's life, which is when Malbolgia made a deal for Al to become his general in exchange for being able to see his wife. But in the end, it didn't really work out too well for this ruler of Hell, did it? Nope. Number 5, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but he didn't really do much and was never really mentioned until very recently. Uranos the Undying is an Eternal and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the Deviants and humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into a civil war. Ultimately, Uranos lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the Machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed on the world. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to Deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranus for help in Axe Judgment Day number 1. And he definitely did help, as in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other powerful Omega level mutants. Number 4, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife, Hegra, and their sons rule the Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough for him. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all exists. So he's a conqueror, sure, but he's also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. I don't even know how that works. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing for millions of other worlds while on his way to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his son Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War. Number 3. Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. So yes, he is incredibly ancient. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. You see, Kulan Gath had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath sought out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by taking the life of and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan the Barbarian, Kulan was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence into a magical amulet. So yes, he pulled a Voldemort and made a Horcrux. After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger, who donned the amulet, allowing Kulan Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead and never possessed by Gath. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to make sure that you never get back. Number 2, the Great Darkness. So great. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, which is, I think I said that right, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, it was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the 3 main figures of hell to form a union with each other just in case it decided to attack them, which it didn't. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing, of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as yin and yang, or as a balance, that kind of thing. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also, it's kinda just a force of nature. Sort of. Number 1, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose the bigger, more dangerous, and surprisingly not well-known Pappy of Galactus? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Thimble Winter, was the one who brought the end to the 6th iteration of the cosmos, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, the one who becomes Galactus, alive. The Black Winter essentially made Galen his herald, so when the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possessed the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's nuts! That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. But Luckily, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe. He's just here for his herald, Galactus. But still, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter completely, and it's incredibly awesome.
Number 10, Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage is definitely one of the most ancient villains out there. It's actually kind of like his whole thing. Savage originally existed all the way back in the prehistoric ages, having initially been a caveman. He got his powers from a radioactive meteorite, which granted him immortality and enhanced intelligence. Even way back then, he was fighting heroes like Batman, if you can believe it. This was after Batman was sent on some time adventures after facing off against Darkseid. While he was suspected as being dead, in reality, Darkseid's Omega Sanction had simply banished Batman to wander through time, which actually kind of sounds nice to me, except that part of this punishment was that his lives that he would experience were all supposed to be, well, pretty awful. Still though, when facing off against Vandal Savage, even with Vandal's somewhat newfound powers, Batman won. I mean, you can be ancient and immortal, but that doesn't mean that you're immune from being beaten by Batman, right? Batman's got that plot armor, baby. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here on Top 10 Nerd, and you love when I talk about supervillains, I know I do, be sure to check out our supervillains playlist over on the channel for even more good villainous content. Number 9, Surtur. Surtur is not someone we think of too often or even touch on, but he's a pretty big deal in the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, in the MCU, he successfully managed to destroy Asgard, fulfilling his prophesized role in Ragnarok. And what's more, Thor knew that this was what needed to be done in order to stop his sister Hela. So despite facing off against Surtur initially, he ended up having to be the one to free him so that the prophecy could actually be realized, sacrificing the place of Asgard in order to save the people of Asgard. In the comics, Surtur is an ancient foe, having been the sworn enemy of Odin for, well, pretty much forever. He hails from Muspelheim, and even for years successfully stopped Odin from achieving an alliance between the people of Odin's own Asgardian tribe, the Aesir, and the other Asgardian tribe known as the Vanir. Number 8, Circe. Circe is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite ancient villains around, possibly one of my favorite DC villains of all time around. Being that she is also the Circe from ancient Greek myth, I think you can understand just how old she is. Circe is known for being a powerful witch, and in the Prime Earth continuity was also revealed to be one of Hecate's witch marked. Her insane magical ability is how she has been able to survive for so long, without also appearing to have aged much at all. However, I will also add that in the New Earth continuity, this is also thanks to the fact that Circe is actually descended from Titans, which not only makes her immortal and ageless, but also pretty durable as well. Circe is known for being a powerful Wonder Woman foe, but despite the fact that Wonder Woman is really well known among comic fans, I feel like her villains get less time in the spotlight for, I don't know, for some reason, despite the fact that Wonder Woman actually has a pretty stacked rogues gallery all her own. And like Circe, many of them also seem to have a rich and interesting history. Seriously, I feel like Circe could just like have her own comic series. That's how much she has and has had going on throughout her life and throughout the comics. Number 7, Morgan Le Fay. Speaking of powerful witches, Morgan Le Fay is a villain we really don't get to showcase or focus on a lot on this channel, so I am taking this opportunity to remind you of just how ancient and how bad she is. Morgan Le Fay is a villain who hails originally from Arthurian legend and was adopted as a character in Marvel Comics all the way back in 1955, making her first appearance in Black Knight issue number 1. But of course, she's actually much older than 1955 in terms of her canon character history. Morgan Le Fay existed just after the ancient and mythical times of the island of Atlantis. In this version of the story, not all of the island was lost, and actually some islands that were part of Atlantis still existed, chiefly Avalon, which is where Morgan was born. Unfortunately, the remaining isles of Atlantis would eventually also be drowned and swallowed up by the sea, causing Morgan, her mother, and the man who would become known as Merlin to flee to Britain. This all happened before the 6th century, with Morgan eventually temporarily becoming Merlin's apprentice. As a villain, Morgan has not only tormented the people of her own time period, but she has also traveled to the present day and threatened the people and heroes of that time as well. Number 6, Barbatos. Barbatos is the Bat God who basically helped Batman to become what he is today, but as part of his own dark machinations. At least, you know, Barbatos claims to be that. According to Barbatos, he was the bat that appeared before Bruce the night that he decided to become Batman, inspiring the young Bruce Wayne to go on to don the cape and cowl, and becoming a major symbol for Batman. Barbatos was once the loyal ally of the World Forger. He was a dragon who would destroy worlds that were unstable, often built on fear, known as belonging to the Forge of Worlds. Barbatos, however, grew to enjoy destroying worlds so much that he actually decided to rebel against the World Forger so he could destroy more worlds, ultimately destroying his master, which allowed him to corrupt his Forge of Worlds, with it warping and ultimately becoming known by a name you might be more familiar with, the Dark Multiverse. Just as the World Forger is one of the oldest beings in the cosmos over at DC, so is his pet dragon gone rogue, Barbatos. Barbatos would go on to recruit others to his new purpose to destroy the main multiverse. Number 5. Morlun and the Inheritors. Morlun and the Inheritors sounds like the name of a band. A band of vampires? Not a thing. A coven of vampires, really, I guess I should say. And no, I don't believe they play musical instruments and or perform in any kind of musical acts, sadly. Morlun and the Inheritors are a threat that we meet as we go into the Spider-Verse. They were the main antagonists of the Spider-Verse event in the comics, which promised to feature all the alternate Spider-Men, women, and folks that had ever featured. And they were also the main antagonists of the follow-up event, Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires that feed specifically on what is known as totemic life energy. What is that? What is a totem? It is usually a superpowered or somewhat unique individual who represents some kind of powerful animal instinct or arachnid avatar, like spiders! Morlun specifically is well known for being a main villain of Spider-Man's, and while he's not as prominently featured as, some of other Spidey's villains, he is still particularly powerful. We don't really know, I don't think, how old the Inheritors or Morlun are, at least not in their first life, but we do know they're pretty old, having participated in fights in the multiverse seemingly a long time ago. Also, they'd like to dress up super Victorian, so they gotta at least be from that era or beyond, although they're not necessarily Earth-based villains, they're multiversal villains. Number 4. Sin. Sin might be one that people are a little bit more familiar with in another form, but also there might be a lot of you out there who aren't, as this villain hails from the Spawn comics. If you are up to date with your Spawn reading, then you know who I'm talking about here, but for those of you who aren't up to date or who maybe have never read Spawn, this villain was actually formerly known as a longtime ally of Al Simmons' Spawn, his mentor in a way, Cogliostro. While initially just seeming like a well-meaning fellow Hellspawn, seeking to teach Al the ropes and also help to guide him away from being fully used as a pawn of hell, Cogliostro is actually later revealed to be more ancient than we might have otherwise thought, in fact also being known by another name even before he was known as Cog. Cain. Yeah, the Cain, the man from biblical myth who killed his brother and was condemned for it, Cain of Cain and Abel. After revealing that he was really only helping Spawn to serve his own interests and becoming a villain, Cog was redeemed once more for a short little while before becoming a villain again, who has the ability to drain the power of other Hellspawns, being known now as Sin. Sin with 2 N's. Number 3. Ramatut. While we all know Kang the Conqueror now, thanks to him being featured in the MCU in Quantumania, and the hype for his inclusion in that film being very real, I would say at this point, not everyone is as familiar with the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from Earth 6311. Despite the fact that this is a villain from the future, Kang actually has existed across time in many different forms, adopting the form even of an ancient pharaoh. This was back when Kang was a ruler in ancient Egypt, before he was really even Kang. Nathaniel Richards became obsessed with the reality of Earth 616 and would eventually construct a time machine shaped like a sphinx and use it to travel back in time to around 2960 BC. Having brought with him a robotic army and advanced futuristic weapons, it wasn't long before Nathaniel was the ruler of Egypt, taking the name of Ramatut. This version of Nathaniel also became focused and obsessed on the creation of En-Saba-Nur, who, as Ramatut knew, was destined to become the world's first mutant. Number 2. Perpetua. Perpetua is one of those characters who is super powerful and who tons of people should know about, really, just for that reason alone, I would say. But no. Instead, most folks know more about the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua's son, than they do about her. Granted, this could be because she's simply a newer character, and in that case, I mean, fair enough. She's a newer character, but she's also really old because she's kind of like a retcon character. Perpetua is known for being the first one to create the multiverse, or at least, one of the first people, depending on how you like to reconcile DC lore, because I feel like Perpetua isn't the first one that we've said that about. While Anti-Monitor is the character most well known for causing the Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's later revealed that Perpetua was the one truly pulling his strings, and therefore responsible for this crisis. In fact, Perpetua feeds off Crisis energy, and is said to have been responsible for all crises we've seen. At least all crises we've seen before Dark Crisis, likely, since I think she was dead when that one actually took place, so, or at least defeated. Is she still alive? I don't think so. Number 1. Rotath of Lemuria. Heading back to the Hyborian Age once again on one of our ancient lists, which by the way, if you want to visit the Hyborian Age again and again, you should check out part 1 and part 2 of our ancient superheroes list. We got you. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented often in stories from the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. Rotath made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 70s, when everyone was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died though, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return. And so he did, this time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated, this time not by Kull directly, but instead of course after fighting Conan and Juma, and also being defeated by a giant slug, which that part is a little random, but hey, I'll take it.